The moment my son was placed in my arms, wrapped in blue hospital cloth and screaming with the force of new life, I believed, truly believed, that my world had finally become whole. But within minutes, that same moment of greatest joy would detonate my entire life, exposing a truth so devastating that I would spend months wishing the walls of that delivery room had collapsed on me instead. For 6 years, I had loved my wife, Emily, with a loyalty that bordered on blind faith. We met young, built our lives from tiny apartments and shared ramen dinners into a comfortable home and a future I thought was unbreakable. When she told me she was pregnant, I remember dropping to my knees in the kitchen, laughing and crying at the same time. I rubbed her belly every night. I talked to the baby. I painted the nursery myself. I pictured teaching my son to ride a bike, to throw a ball, to be brave in a hard world. I trusted Emily completely. That was my greatest mistake. The pregnancy was not easy. Emily became distant in ways I blamed on hormones and stress. She guarded her phone more than usual, took long walks alone, and sometimes came home with red eyes she said were from crying over baby fears. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Love can make you stupid in the quietest ways. Still, I worked harder than ever, saving money for our future, dreaming of first steps and first words. I was building a life for a family I didn't realize was already broken. The night she went into labor, everything felt unreal. The hospital lights were harsh, the beeping machines relentless. Emily screamed, cried, cursed me, then clung to my hand as if I were the only thing tethering her to reality. For hours, I stood there, terrified and awed, whispering encouragement, promising that everything would be okay. And then, finally, our son arrived. The doctor lifted him, announced the time, and placed him gently in my arms. I looked down at his tiny face, his wrinkled skin, his eyes squeezed shut against a world he had just entered. And then I noticed his hair. Jet black. Thick. Curly. I am blonde. Emily is blonde. For a split second, my mind tried to explain it away with some weak logic about distant relatives or genetic flukes. But the thought lodged itself like a shard of glass in my chest. When Emily asked to see him, I passed my son to her with trembling hands. The nurse smiled, commenting on his beautiful dark features. I couldn't speak. My heart was pounding so loudly that I barely heard the rest of the room. Later, when the staff left us alone, I finally said what I had been choking on. I tried to laugh it off at first, made a weak joke about him not looking like either of us. Emily's face went pale. Too pale. Her hands tightened around the baby as if I might take him away. She didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything before her words ever could. At first, she denied it. Swore he was mine. Swore I was imagining things. Swore I was being cruel for even questioning it during such a sacred moment. But then I asked about the dark hair. The dark eyes. The blood type we'd discussed months earlier that suddenly didn't add up. Her voice broke. The room felt like it shrank around us. And finally, through sobs and shattered defenses, she confessed. She had been having an affair for over a year. The words didn't just hurt, they hollowed me out. She said she'd been lonely. That I worked too much. That it just happened. That it was a mistake that went too far. The baby, she admitted, could belong to the other man. My knees buckled. I slid down into the chair beside the bed, staring at the floor while my entire past rewrote itself in my mind. Late nights. Guarded phone calls. Sudden gym sessions. Errands that took hours. Every lie I had ignored now stood behind me like a parade of betrayal. I demanded a DNA test before I signed anything. She cried harder, said I was humiliating her, said I was ruining what should have been a happy memory. But I stood my ground with a strength I didn't know I had. The test was ordered. The days that followed were the longest of my life. I moved through them like a ghost. Friends congratulated me. My parents cried with happiness when they heard they had a grandson. I smiled when I had to, answered messages when I could, and broke down in silence when I was alone. I stayed because I needed the truth. I needed certainty before I made choices I could never undo. When the results came, there was no ambiguity. I was not the father. The air left my lungs as if I'd been punched. Emily collapsed into tears, apologizing over and over, but her words meant nothing anymore. The truth was final and merciless. The son I had dreamed about, painted for, planned my entire future around, he was not biologically mine. Yet in the awful confusion of that moment, Something else terrified me even more. I still felt love when I looked at him. It wasn't the same anymore, but it was there. And that complicated everything. I packed a bag that night and left. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. Every corner echoed with lies. I stayed with my brother, barely sleeping, replaying every year of my marriage and wondering how I had missed what had been right in front of me. The other man, it turned out, was someone Emily worked with. Married. 2 kids of his own. Our lives had been built on the ruins of other people's homes. Divorce papers followed swiftly. So did threats, bargaining, begging. Emily wanted forgiveness. She wanted me to help raise the child. She said biology shouldn't matter. For weeks, I wrestled with the hardest decision of my life. I had bonded with that baby in ways that no DNA test could erase. But I also knew that staying would trap me in a future built on deception. I had to choose between the life I imagined and the truth I now lived in. In the end, I chose myself. The divorce was brutal. Friends took sides. Some told me I was heartless for walking away from a newborn. Others told me I was strong for refusing to live someone else's lie. I shed tears in court that I didn't even realize I had left. Emily lost her marriage, her reputation, and eventually her job. The other man denied responsibility until a second test forced the truth on him too. 2 families were shattered by secrets that should never have existed. For a long time after, I felt empty. I questioned my worth. I questioned my judgment. I questioned whether trusting anyone again would ever be possible. There were nights I woke up reaching for a child that wasn't mine, heart pounding with grief that had nowhere to go. Therapy helped. Time helped. Pain slowly changed shape from a raw wound into a scar I could touch without screaming. Years later, my life is quieter but stronger. I rebuilt myself piece by piece. I learned that loyalty doesn't guarantee safety, but it does define who you are when everything falls apart. I learned that love doesn't always survive betrayal, but self-respect can. I eventually met someone new, slowly, carefully, with walls I once never had. And for the first time since that hospital room, I felt hope without fear attached to it. The birth of my son, who was never truly mine, destroyed the illusion of the life I thought I had. But it also saved me from living a lie forever. Sometimes the most painful truths arrive wrapped in the most beautiful moments. And sometimes, the thing that breaks you is also the thing that finally sets you free.